He is a four-time NFL MVP who also happens to be one of the most polarizing figures in professional football. Aaron Rodgers spent 18 seasons with the Packers before being traded to the Jets last year and has since dominated the NFL's news cycle the last couple of years, from his COVID stance to his methods of spirituality and his romances and his embracing of conspiracy theories. Sports biographer Ian O'Connor pulls back the curtain in his new book, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. And Ian joins us now. Good morning.
Hey, Pat, how are you?
Good. You know, you think Aaron Rodgers, you almost forget that this is a guy that we only knew as a four-time MVP at some point. And over the last couple of years, the whole dynamic around him has changed. And I heard that you pointed it out. I mean, it really did stem from that one incident with COVID where he said he was immunized. And I know he told you this is the one thing he wished he could have taken back. But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, what I read from the exchange there, it almost sounded like he was upset that he did it because now critics can hold it against him, and not that he was necessarily misleading people. Is that correct?
Well, I think Patty realizes both, that he gave critics ammunition that they still have today. And he felt like that was the one thing I handed them, and it was an unforced error. But I also think he realizes he did mislead the public. Effectively, it was a lie. And I do think he regrets that as well. He doesn't regret his stance on the vaccine. He still feels the same way about it. That hasn't changed. But he knows that that mistake really was a major public relations hit that he really has not recovered from 3 years later. And that's unfortunate.
You got to spend 2 hours with him. That was all he gave you access for. You know, he's kind of become this polarizing guy who embraces all of these things over the last couple of years. And, you know, that kind of persona is not necessarily original in this day and age, especially with a lot of people on social media. And I wonder the same thing I wonder about a lot of these guys. You know, how much of this stuff that he says do you think he believes, and how much do you think he's kind of trolling people?
I think it's more that he genuinely believes the conspiracy theories. He was into conspiracies back in high school, so that's been a part of his life for a long time. Do I think he sometimes leans into the villainous role? Yeah, he does, but he is a fearless public speaker. And I think after the COVID situation, where media members who used to praise him for his social awareness stances for supporting Colin Kaepernick and other causes turned on him, and he decided that if you want to give me a war, I'll be a willing participant in that war. And he has dug in on a lot of fronts. He's defended sometimes some indefensible positions. But I think it's really more his genuine beliefs that he's not backing away from, as opposed to playing a role on social media and beyond.
You talked to a lot of people in his circle, a lot of people. I mean, I think it was 250 interviews, I think you did. So you do paint a really good, complete picture of him. And there are a lot of people who will say that this guy was a terrific teammate. He looked out for people in ways that you'll never hear about because he keeps a lot of this stuff to himself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, his marketing agent is Ed Berry, and is a guy who is very frustrated with his client because he says Aaron does a lot of acts of kindness and generosity behind the scenes, and I want to publicize some of them, and he won't let me. And I want to try to counter the negative narrative that's been out there. 90% of the coverage of Aaron the last 3 years has been really negative outside of his play on the field. And his friends talked to me for the book about just the way he is with their children. He's sometimes Randall Cobb, his longtime teammate, said he flew across the country to come to my son's 3-year-old birthday party. How many people do you know who would do that? So he's very good with children, with sick children particularly, and that story's not told. Also, his teammates universally love him. Outside of a couple of guys in Green Bay over the years, 99% of the teammates I talked to from high school through the pros absolutely admire and respect the guy, and that somehow is never a part of the public discussion of who Aaron Rodgers is as a player in person. And that's surprising because he spent the most amount of time with his teammates, and it's just not part of the narrative.
Let's talk about him as a player. I mean, this is a guy, I mean, even living in Chicago, you're trained to hate Aaron Rodgers. But, I mean, there were so many moments in the regular season where I just loved watching this guy because he would do things that were just remarkable. And then oftentimes, you know, that guy didn't always show up in the playoffs. And what's the explanation for that? I mean, I look at Aaron Rodgers and I'm like, this is a guy who should have won 4 Super Bowls.
By the way, Aaron used to watch Chicago sports on WGN as a kid in California. So he actually was a fan of Chicago sports teams to some degree, despite the fact that his name is not exactly gold right now in Chicago. But yeah, he 11-10 overall in the postseason, only one championship ring. Tom Brady has 7. A lot of it was, to me, coaching, the defensive breakdown, special teams breakdowns in 2014 in the NFC Championship game. If they recover an onside kick, he's back in the Super Bowl. They didn't recover it at Seattle. So there's been some bad luck. But at the end of the day, he does have to own that. There are plays and points that he did leave on the field in some big moments in the postseason. And that's why going to the Jets made sense. If he wins a championship in the big city for a franchise that has not been to the Super Bowl since January of 1969, that's going to erase a lot of on-field and off-field sins.
All right, the book is Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. For more, check out Ian's website and follow him on X. Ian, thank you so much.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll be back after this.